Hello, everyone. My name is Gary Gomes. I'm here to talk with you about world events, Vedic astrology, and the interaction between the two of those, and also how Vedic astrology affects you personally in your horoscope. This one I'm hoping to make much shorter than the other, um, actually because I have a commitment. I have to get out. I have to be done within an hour. So that makes my attention to the time a little more um, pressing. I've actually picked kind of an ambitious show this week, actually, so I'll see if I can summarize my thoughts in a few lines for each chart I'm going to show you. Um, this is Sunday, December 22nd. I'm going to be talking a lot about foreign policy. Excuse me, I'm not really. I'm not trying to do a mental coordination exercise. I'm trying to flatten my hair down in the mirror. All right. So basically, if you would like, please subscribe. It helps the channel immensely. It helps me get better equipment, better editing, and also better presentation for you folks. And also, we're really close to 1,000 subscribers now. Like really about 150 away. So that would be wonderful if we could hit 1,000 very, very soon. And again, I know is a tough sell to a lot of people, a lot of folks who are used to looking at astrology charts more in terms of lessons, and I will start doing those next year. And also, just for your edification. I do readings. I do lessons um, on a one-on-one basis. And I'll be giving a lecture on Gemini astrology at the American College of Vedic Astrology on February 2nd. So you can look up that site and you can learn a little bit about about uh, one of the more interesting systems in Vedic astrology. Vedic astrology is not so much one system, it's a series of systems, which sometimes overlap, sometimes don't overlap with one another. So it's a series of astrological techniques, some of which can be self-contained, some of which can be added or supplement other existing materials. So it's a fascinating realm of study, I think, and it's got marked similarities with Western astrology and marked differences with it. If you want to contact me for a reading or classes, please text me at 508 525 0001. Again, that's 508 525 0001. Or you can email me at Gary Gomes, GaryGomes, G, that's the letter G, at gmail.com. So that's Gary Gomes, G, at gmail.com. So let's start off with a look at the world map right now. So many of you are probably aware that Israel um, sent missiles to Iran last night or yesterday. So I'm going to put now a chart on the wall on the screen. And so right now, I'm going to show you the chart. Hold on a second. Okay, so right now we have Rahu's in Pisces in the first house. I've already spoken about this at great length. This makes people a little panicky or a little bit feel a little bit constricted or tight. Um, this makes sense given the fact we're at the holidays. Um, and just in general interpretation, maybe a little bit optimistic but fearful at the same time because there is going to be a change in administrations that always produces feelings of optimism and fear at the same time, depending on whose side you're on. Uh, and we have a Mars Saturn um, aspect and a Mars Venus aspect right now. And Mars is in Cancer and Mercury's in Scorpio. So, and we have a K2 moon conjunction. So again, there's a little bit of uncertainty about the direction the world is going to take because of the K2 moon conjunction. Also, Mars is indirectly influencing the moon through Mercury being placed in Scorpio. So this kind of makes people a little paranoid about the future. The main things to keep in mind is that Rahu in this particular sign, and I've been saying this for the past year or so, does promise change. Every Rahu Mahadasha that I've seen the United States in has been a time of global change. Now, why should the United States affect the rest of the world? Well, it really doesn't. But essentially, every astrology chart through extrapolation reflects the larger world. Okay, so I've long had a theory that you could technically read, depending on which house preferences you chose or which patterns you chose. And I think this is true. If we work it out, you could read the entire um, an entire family from one person's chart, I've actually done that. And you can actually read all those extended families, and by implication, you could read the entire world from that chart, depending on how you extrapolate. Countries are much larger entities. You can see what's happening in foreign countries at the same time as you see what's happening in, let's say, the United States. And so this sort of fits in well with the idea that, let's say, the United States was undergoing a K2 Mahadasha in the 1960s, late 1960s. Were there wars and were there political uprisings? There were, so I mean, you can even go back to the 1840s, which would have been the last United States K2 Mahadasha, and you would have seen revolutionary spirit cropping up in Europe. This was the advent of the Marxist re revolutions, or the attempts to spread Marxism to other or the attempt to spread workers' rebellions around the world. So you can actually see what's happening in other places by looking at the chart of your home country. It depends on what factors you look at. It depends on which analytical factors you may use. Now, this won't be as precise as looking at the home country's chart by any stretch of the imagination, but you can get an idea of what's happening in the world just by looking at where the planets are right now, and also the perspective on what's happening around the world. So that's a bold claim. Some people will look at me and say, "Oh, Gary, you're wrong," but I sense that I'm right. It's essentially, if you can. Now, again, it requires great discrimination. It requires more skill than I claim I possess. But I think in theory it can be done. So we're looking at the world right now as a state of where the world is right now around noontime in the United States of America, in a city called New Bedford, Mass. So there's a little bit of panic. Everybody's a little bit worried about wars. Everybody's worried about money. Everybody's worried about foreign engagements and losses. Okay. But the sun's in the 10th house, so that gives a certain amount of optimism. But we are looking at disruptive political systems over the next few months. Okay, that's not a surprise. Um, this is being mirrored in a variety of countries around the world. And if we go back to over here, Moon K2 populations relatively discontent in most parts of the world. Mercury's in the ninth house. There is increasing desire for change and communication of that change. And again, like I said, the factors we're all interested in are uncertainty about the future, worry about the future, worry about the direction of, of the world, worry that changes, that promised changes will actually produce the results they say they will, and economic security, excuse me. So those are all fairly evident combinations from this particular chart. If we're looking at things like natural disasters, which I think I dwell on too much in this particular, um, there can be some water-related damages over here, Moon K2 conjunction, and Rahu and Pisces, and some air-related damages because of Saturn in this particular sign. And also the cold wave can be looked at because of Venus and Saturn sign aspected by Mars and aspecting Saturn. So those are involved. One show I did years ago on cable TV was I sat down with a Western astrologer and we essentially, this was around, I think around 2001 or 2002. And we essentially made weather predictions based upon the astrology chart. So that was an interesting experience. Um, and it turned out um, ba I can't claim I was more accurate than the Western astrologer, but we were both fairly accurate. So so essentially we do have that Jupiter Mercury opposition right now. That's a good thing. And that will make everybody optimistic going into the new year. Um, and also relationship life will be a little bit calmer than normal, despite some crankiness today. Again, I would urge people to look out for dietary problems or digestive issues because of K2 being in Virgo and affecting the moon. That'll be a consistent problem over the next few months. And also Saturn's in the 12th. So again, there are some health issues connected with digestion and also with the eliminated parts of the body. But this is just general. It's going to vary depending on your particular chart. The other thing is um, people should not take on too much right now. And that's one thing I'm trying to not to do. uh, just because of certain things certain obligations that I have. So I'm going to switch away from this chart and we'll go back to this chart when we're ready to go to look at the individual charts for this. And I'm going to give you like the quickest overview I possibly can of certain countries. Okay. So so we'll start with Ukraine, then we'll go to Russia, then we'll go to Israel, then we'll go to Iran and possibly Turkey. Okay, so right now, and I have a reason for including Turkey, which has more to do with the fact uh, than with the fact that I have students over there. It has more to do with Turkey's place in um, in Middle Eastern politics. So so essentially, Ukraine was founded in 1991. At least the current republic was. So we can argue about earlier days, but to be honest with you, the current government is usually what I take as or the foundation, essentially in a unbroken governmental uh, system or a declaration that turned into a constitution. So so essentially, um, so let's look at Ukraine's chart. Saturn's in the third house, so Ukraine isn't ready to give up yet. I think by March, you'll see a shift in Ukraine, and they'll be um, at least ready to negotiate peace. K2's in the seventh house. I think you'll see a fully broken peace in Ukraine in by June or July of next year. Um, Ninth house, Saturn's aspecting the ninth house, so that can make a lot of stubbornness connected with the leadership. I'm not saying they should or shouldn't be stubborn. I'm just saying this is what the chart's showing. But the problem you have with Ukraine is, given this cluster of planets in the ninth house, there's really not any one individual in charge of Ukraine. Zelensky really isn't in charge of Ukraine. It looks like a cadre of interests are in charge of Ukraine from this cluster right here. And they and right now, because of Mars being in the same sign with K2, they want to fight. So they'll stick with that particular ethos for the next few months. Okay, so that's just a quick overview. So this should resolve. Let me just see now. I'm looking at their Mahadashas, Jupiter. Yeah, I can't see them lasting much beyond March 6th. Again, I've said this before, and they've surprised me, but there will be a different administration, and I would imagine the new administration will be uh, looking to encourage some kind of a negotiation. Russia, I just entered today. Russia has. Now, this chart may be a little different than other charts I've looked at before. Russia has a Cancer rising. That's an action starting. It's kind of an expansive sign, to be honest with you. Jupiter and Moon are in the second house, causes some expansion. But I do think you will see them essentially what I would call giving up around June or July of this year because of Jupiter going into their 12th house and putting more emphasis on exports. Um, Rahu's in their 10th house right now. It is fueling some expansionary interest in Russia, definitely. Or it's in their ninth house, excuse me. It's fueling an expansionist leader, excuse me, in terms of Vladimir Putin. And Jupiter and Moon are in the second house, so this actually indicates a relatively wealthy country, um, at least long term. Venus is in the third house. Mars and Mercury are in the fourth house, so they really can't be trusted. Ukraine can't either, but I forgot to um, look at the factors for Ukraine not being trusted. But believe me, neither country is particularly trustworthy, um, and especially politically. Okay, so they're very untrustworthy politically. But in terms of one, two, in terms of foreign relations, they do want good trade relations with the West in terms of economic security. Um, they have been Saturn aspecting the first house. Yeah, it's kind of a stupid placement. So that makes them prone to dictatorships um, or uh, non-egalitarian rule. Their leadership will be formed through um, secret undertakings. This is nothing that I think surprises anybody. Um, but that Venus in the fourth house, that's actually not a bad placement because it does indicate, especially as they move towards their Moon Venus subperiod in 2028, they'll be more financially prosperous. But I think after January 9th, 2025, I think you'll see them get more aggressive, if I'm totally honest with you. Um, and that will be more up their attacks. I don't think they'll go nuclear, um, just because I'm not seeing a lot of combinations for K2 going into the second house until this summertime. And I think if that were to happen, it would happen much more. It would have happened, to be honest with you, earlier than we're seeing right now. The Moon Mahadasha is interesting because it's really about Russia. This Mahadasha is really about Russia's place in the world and how it wants to view itself and how it wants to communicate with the world. So I'm not defending them. Believe me, I do. I'm not defending their invasion of Ukraine. However, it's really about recovery of recovery of not valor, property they think was stolen from them, either either correctly or incorrectly. So Jupiter rules the sixth house, Rahu's there, and there's a little bit of a lie going on here, obviously, but again, will they recover some territory? Yes. Will they want to take over Ukraine or invade Europe? I don't see that from this astrological chart. Okay, so let's go on to so we're talking about changes in governance around March, but also increased. Um, just trying to think of the right word for it. Increased um, reticence about and probably increased internal opposition to the war. Let's go to Israel. And keep in mind, I'm deliberately avoiding any indication of moral rectitude in any of these countries. Uh, okay, so Israel, Saturn aspects the first house. So always under attack, always under some kind of um, burden. Okay, somebody should have chosen a different time for Israel. God. Okay, in what's called a 7.5 year period of Saturn. So they were basically forced to fight from the very beginning, from the very foundation. Whether or not they deserve that space or not is not for me to say. And look, they have Mars in the 12th house, although it's in Leo, very strong defenses, but always under attack. Even partners won't defend them at times. Okay. K2's in the second house. It's a very K2 in the second house is pretty interesting because it does indicate kind of a loner society. Um, but again, one that's not doomed to go away anytime soon. Okay, because this is a protected placement. Sun is in the ninth house, along with Mercury. That tends to make a country last. Now, Jupiter's in this sign right now, which is why they've been subject to so much um, moral outrage over the past few months, um, and also why their government's being contested. After maybe heating up with the war after March of this year, I hope I'm wrong about this, but after March of this year, and I think overall uh, by July, you'll see them relatively, you'll see them getting pretty much what they want. But this has been over the next 6 months or so, you'll see a really so Israel is going through what's called an Ashami Shani, which is an eighth house transit of Saturn. And this particular transit changes the society. So, or it changes the person, but it changes a society. And it makes it re-examine itself. And so you will see some changes in Israel, maybe not exactly the ones that people on either side want to see. But I would say with Jupiter entering Gemini, there's no doubt in my mind they'll achieve their goals. But also there'll be a change, there'll be an ethical change before the middle year, an extreme ethical change. Um, and so, and maybe even a new government by the end of next year. So let's go on to um, yeah, that's the Rahu Jupiter subcycle over here. Okay, or Iran. Let's look at Iran. I haven't looked at Syria. I probably should, but we'll look at Iran. Syria's just basically collapsed. Iran, Scorpio rising seems appropriate. Iran's in a Jupiter-Venus subperiod. So, all right, Venus is with K2, is in Aquarius. Saturn is passing over this particular sign right now. So Iran's going to get pretty wrecked over the next few months. Okay. Just warning you, not that I want to see that happen. I'm just telling you that's what's going to happen. Um, K2 is considered a Mars-like planet. It's in a Venus subgrade. Venus is not a friendly planet for this rising sign. It indicates losses. So there'll be losses of commerce, there'll be losses of trade, there'll be panic, especially around May of 2025. And I'm not sure if there'll be a new government, but certainly this government will destabilize. There'll be a lot of political unrest around April to May of this year. But in terms of Saturn aspecting the first house, this will make Iran stay involved in these conflicts over the next few months. It isn't going to win these conflicts, not by any stretch of the imagination. And actually, it will end up in worse shape by June than it is right now. So again, this isn't politically based, this is astrologically based, but the astrology does not look good for Iran. Uh, the only thing it has saving it is it's in this Jupiter Mahadasha, and it will make it engage in more warlike activities over the next few years. So that's something that will maintain it, will save it. But um, I think, especially in the immediate future, especially through January 17, 2027, anything they do will tend to be hurt badly. And especially between May and September. Okay. It will be essentially non-productive. It'll hurt them. It'll penalize them more than it will help them. And lastly, Turkey. Let's go into Turkey. I've seen this chart a lot. It's a Gemini rising. Turkey. Now, one of the reasons I went to Turkey was because I'd heard that Mr. Prime Minister of Turkey is the head of the Muslim League. And there is some pro-war sentiment building in Turkey. Okay, so Turkey could theoretically be on the border with Israel. And I was wondering if there was some possibility that they would get involved in the war. And there is a possibility because of this K2 Mars subperiod. But, and especially through January 15th of 2025. But what I'm theorizing is that after March 10th, a lot of Turkey's interest in that will essentially dissipate. You may see them invade Syria because of what's happening with the Kurdish state that's being established there. And that's where it looks like I think they'll put their attention. I don't think they're going to do, uh, I don't think they're going to engage in the wider war with Israel. I think they'll be more concerned with the Kurdish state right on their border. And, and essentially, so this is politics that you probably most people probably wouldn't pay attention to. I won't say you particularly, most people won't pay attention to. But again, there is some indication they may have been um, between December 27th and January 15th, there could be a reaction against Israel, but I think that's unlikely. It looks more like a reaction against the Syrian part of, of what's become a Kurdish state. And that's what it looks more likely to me to happen. Um, Turkey has been in economic trouble for the past roughly 5 years. That's mainly because of its sun major planetary period. Sun rules the third house. Rahu's in the third house in a constellation called Purva Falguni, which should be good, but the sun is debilitated. It's very weak in this chart. So, and it's also in conjunction with Saturn, which weakens it more, although Saturn is strong, and Venus, which is essentially a prosperity-bearing planet for this particular rising sign. It won't break out of this particular financial crisis until, I would say, March of 2025, when the Venus subperiod comes in. And you'll also see some financial growth happening, a lot of financial growth happening after 2026. So, or possibly, I mean, especially when Mars goes back over that first house. But again, like I said, I think it'll be more local conflict as Mars is in its second house. All right, so let's go over here and go back to your individual charts. We're going to have a now chart up. So for Aries, Aries still has too much attention focused on expenses. It's trying to outrun its bills. Mars is retrograde in this particular sign in Cancer. So there's not a real strong feeling that you can fight back against the desires of the family. But there are increasing stresses because of the K2 moon conjunction over here. Um, and some short-temperedness. Um, Seventh house Lord is Venus. Lord of the seventh is in the 11th house. So that's good for financial gain through spouses. It's what Saturn is. I'm sorry, it's in the 10th house. My apologies. And Saturn's in the 11th house. So that should give some slow financial gains for this sign. But again, I'd encourage every sign to be really careful with money over the next few months. Not because I'm worried about the economy, but just because, again, there's this pressure to overspend over the next few months. And I like to see the economy keep going, obviously. You know, that's not really my major concern, or that's not really my major hang up. I don't want to see people deny themselves of things they want, but um, this can make inflation or demand for consumer goods really very impactful and can hurt um, the effort to bring prices down again. So just buy, but buy, like I've said many times before, buy things you really need. Um, for and the sun is in the ninth house. So again, this is distrust or dislike of authority figures or government. Or is it in the 10th? Yes, in the ninth house. So that's not going away. For Taurus, this is May 15th to June 15th. Um, Aries is April 15th through May 15th. Jupiter is in the first house. This is very good for financial gains, although they won't last long. And second house, Lord, is in the seventh. So that's, again, good for financial gains for this sign. Mars will increase expenditures for things you desire, uh, things connected with siblings or brothers. And fourth house Lord is the sun is located in the eighth house. So again, there will be some family related expenses, hidden expenses. K2 and Moon are in the fifth house, so children will be a little bit cranky and difficult to control over the next week. Mercury is in the seventh house, good for communications with spouse. Venus is in the ninth house, good for financial gain, hard work, and temporary gain of new friendships. Okay, so not a bad week for Taurus. For Gemini, Gemini has Mars in the second house, Jupiter in the 12th house. So again, there's this stress on household and family matters. This is June 15th to July 15th. People born during this time span are having their rising sign in this sign or their moon in this sign. And this will give some problems with family members. Family members maybe have difficulty or have some health issues. Uh, that shows up from K2 moon, even some psychological issues or some problems connected with mom. Um, Mercury's in the sixth house. So again, that's not a bad placement. But again, you'll have to watch out for people trying to take advantage of you, especially family members. Sun is in the seventh house. Um, and that puts a lot of focus on relationships, but don't expect a lot of help from relationship partners, unfortunately. Venus is in the eighth house. This is one good thing about this sign. It makes the sign very attractive, um, very appealing to other people. Rahu's in the 10th house, good publicity through career. Jupiter's in the 12th, a lot of expenditures connected with kids. For Cancer, Cancer is July 15th to August 15th. Mars is in the first house. Again, this is a paradox. This is a good combination in terms of what are called yogas uh, or increasing the promise of work life, but it's also difficult because Mars is debilitated in that sign. So there'll be a lot of pressure to do well in work life and also with children. K2 and Moon are in the third house, makes the sign somewhat courageous. Mercury's in the fifth house, will give a lot of communications with children. Sun is in the sixth house, some problems with confidence. Venus is in the seventh house, will give some relationship opportunities if you're interested in that kind of thing, even some business partnerships. Saturn's in the eighth house, again, a life-shifting opportunity for this particular rising sign. And Rahu's in the ninth. This can encourage travel to other countries. Jupiter's in the 11th, financial gains from those travels. For Leo, Leo is uh, August 15th to September 15th. This particular sign placement has K2 and Moon in the first house, Mars is in the 12th. So there can be some difficulties or miscommunications with the relationship partners. Not a good time to get involved in a relationship for anybody with Leo rising or Leo sun. This holds true really until around July of next year. I hate to discourage you, Leo, but I wouldn't get too serious about anybody right now. Um, and K2 and Moon, temper will be a little bit short. Mercury's in the fourth house. Um, Venus is in the sixth house. This gives some financial gains for the sign, but only through hard work. The Lord of the first and the fifth is actually good for luck. So some people will owe you some money that will pay you some money that they owe you this week. Saturn's in the seventh relationship. Life will tend to be rather stagnant or rather difficult. Rahu's in the eighth. This is not a bad placement, but you have to watch out for people trying to pull things behind your back. Jupiter's in the 10th house, very good for career gains. And Mars is in the 12th. Watch out for co-workers or for people trying to sabotage you. Okay. For Virgo, K2 and Moon are in the first house. Um, and this is usually an interesting combination. The sign is usually very psychically disposed when K2's in it. It's very intuitive. It can pick up small deceits pretty easily. The Lord of that sign is in the third house, and essentially you'll be able to communicate deceitful patterns pretty quickly. But again, watch sharp temper. You may lose friends because of this combination. K2, as a matter of fact, we should all watch our tempers a little bit, especially over the next couple of weeks, just because of Mars's placement. Sun is in the fourth house, a lot of focus on home life. Venus is in the fifth, some outlet for creative activities, and that'll extend over the next couple of months. Saturn's in the sixth house, a lot of hard work, a lot of overwork obligations. Rahu's in the seventh, so business partnerships will be a little bit vague um, or difficult to pin down. Jupiter's in the ninth, not a bad time for good luck from bosses. And Mars is in the 11th house, good for gains, but not when you want them, not easily for you. Okay, so this can give some problems with siblings or with coworkers. For Libra, Libra has K2 and Moon in the 12th house. Usually career life tends to get watered down if Moon is in the 12th house. That'll be true for the next couple of days for the sign. Mercury's in the second house. Good for financial gains, although they'll come quickly and go quickly. Sun is in the third house. Basically, that's not a bad combination for courage or ambition or fulfillment of goals. Venus is in the fourth house. Generally, you'll get good help from relationship partners. Saturn's in the fifth. If you work hard, you'll succeed. That may sound very simple and very stupidly simple, but Saturn guarantees success to people who work hard. Okay. Rahu is in the sixth house. So there's some problems with physical health or physical illness. Jupiter in the eighth house tends to aggravate that a little bit as well. And again, this will be mostly digestive um, or urinary issues, and that general part of the body, like below the stomach area. And let's see now, Mars is in the 10th house of career. So it's good for financial gains for career, but again, it'll come with a lot of work. K2 and Moon, we've already spoken about that. All right. Scorpio has Mercury in the first house. This isn't bad. It does tend to give some good financial gains, but you can't trust your friends. Gemini is also ruled by Mercury, so there can be so many unexpected booms or gains. Sun is in the second house. Um, there's a lot of focus on this sign in terms of both age and also in terms of um, just dissolving away. That's maybe the best way to put it. Because the sun is in Mula Nakshatra. That's not good. That's not a good nakshatra. Venus is in the third house. It will give this sign strong desire for political advancement. Saturn's in the fourth. Not the best image, though, to be honest with you. Rahu's in the fifth. Um, Rahu in the fifth house you have to be careful about trusting children and also trusting people and favors you do for people. Jupiter's in the seventh house. Life will try to help you out a bit, but may give you bad guidance. Mars is in the ninth house. The Lord of the first in the ninth is usually a lucky placement. So this should give generally good judgment to the sign. K2 and Moon in the 11th house, like I said, just don't trust people who you take advice from. It's just really not. Um, Normally, I would say trust them, but with this placement, even with Jupiter aspecting, no. Sagittarius has Sun in the first house and Sun's in Mula Nakshatra. So this can bring down existing institutions or existing ways of doing things over the next week or so. Venus is in the second house, so that'll give some increased financial strength. Saturn is in the third house, increased ambition and guts. Rahu's in the fourth house, strong desire to change existing ways of doing things. Jupiter's in the sixth. That gives, again, the urge for reform. Mars is in the eighth. You'll see a lot of wanting or uh, unhappiness about the reform efforts. K2 and Moon are in the 10th house, so you'll see some blockages in terms of reform or trying to change your life, but that'll pass within a couple of days. Let's see, now Mercury's in the 12th house. I don't want to forget about that. That's actually a good placement, and that's actually good for saving money and for getting good deals. For Capricorn, Venus is in the first house. That's considered a very auspicious placement. Very good for financial luck. Mars is aspecting it, which is not so good, but again, it does create kind of a combination between um, kind of a Dana Yoga or wealth producing combination for this sign. So that's actually good. Saturn's in the second house, though. It does advise for slow investing. Rahu's in the third house, a lot of ambition connected with the sign. Jupiter's in the fifth house, generally luck from speculative ventures. K2 and Moon are in the ninth house. And it's generally considered a lucky placement, especially for relationships, for relationship life, although Mars is a little bit difficult, but in the seventh house. So there may be fights with a relationship partner, but good luck from relationship partner. And Mercury's in the 11th house, good for gains. Sun's in the 12th house. Again, watch investments. Um, Aquarius has Saturn in the first house. That makes the sign very bossy, very egotistical, very pushy, um, but also very hardworking and self-sacrificing as well. Rahu's in the second house, so will complain about everything. Jupiter's in the fourth house. Jupiter in the fourth house is not a bad placement. It gives expansion of responsibilities at home. Mars is in the sixth house. Excuse me. If Mars is in the sixth house, good ability to overcome enemies, but with some struggles. Moon is in the eighth house, so there'll be strange obstructions because of enemies. And Mercury is placed in the 10th house, good for career life, especially if you're a writer or working in that particular field, any kind of communications field. And Sun is in the 11th house and Venus in the 12th house, both good combinations for financial gains and savings. Finally, last but not least, we have our friend Pisces. And Pisces has Rahu in the first house. I've already spoken about that at the beginning of this, but Rahu in the first house tends to make this sign rather dissatisfied. Jupiter makes it ambitious in the third house for financial success and security. It will achieve that because Venus is in the 11th house. Mars is in the fifth house. This isn't a bad planet for Pisces rising. It will produce some wealth or some gain of wealth from the sign, but usually at some kind of a cost or sacrifice. K2 and Moon are in the seventh house. Not a bad placement. relationship partners will be cranky or a little bit absent-minded, but basically this isn't bad. Mercury's in the ninth house, good for financial luck, and all these planets good for career, good for financial gain. So that Mercury in the ninth house is good for financial gain, and Venus. Uh, so Mercury and Venus surround the sun in this chart. So that's actually a good placement. That's called, um, oh my goodness, I'm forgetting my terms. Shibakatari Yoga. So that means benefic planets surround the sun. So that actually makes it a rather benefic week overall. So essentially, especially for Sagittarius and also for Pisces, this should be a relatively beneficial week. So just go with it. And Saturn's in the 12th house again, and we have to watch out for over expenditure. Now let's go to the time and space. Change map, and we'll see if we can get this a little bigger. All right, it isn't working for me. It isn't working for me now. So we'll close it down again. Okay, negative. Sorry, folks. Okay, so third time's the charm. So we have the sun passing through Hawaii. Finally, some good news for Hawaii. Um, Maybe in terms of the land deals. Um, we have a moon sign over here, though. So again, there is an element of theft involved in that, to be honest. And there is some theft and some potential for natural um, flooding up around, or for excessive snowfall up around Alaska and northwestern Canada. We have a Mars line going through San Diego and all the way into Utah and all the way into Montana. So essentially, this could make that part of the world more earthquake prone. We saw some problems um, with fires, I think, in San Diego. I'm trying to draw my memory, and maybe even extending into Baja California, and also some danger from fires or flooding up through this part of the country, Utah, up through Wyoming and Montana. The other, when we have a Venus line, Venus lines are definitely flooding lines, and there'll be a lot of communication about that between uh, North and South Dakota and Nebraska and down into um, there's a Mercury line running through Mexico, so we'll be hearing a lot about Mexico and Texas and Oklahoma this week. From We have a Jupiter line running through Minnesota all the way through Texas, touching on excuse me, on Louisiana and touching through Mexico. So we'll hear a lot about court reforms and legal matters from those areas, those parts of the country. There's a Saturn line running through Michigan, so that could indicate some wintry hardship all the way from, I believe I always get Mississippi and Alabama's locations confused, but I believe that's through Alabama and all the way through Michigan. And we have this Sun Rahu line going through Maryland, Virginia, New York, Pennsylvania, and touching Cuba. Cuba's in rough shape financially, touching all the way down to Panama and touching all the way down into Ecuador, Peru, and just bordering Chile. Now, Sun Rahu lines usually indicate some kind of government scandal. So I think it wouldn't be unsurprising for me to see more government scandals connected with the outgoing Biden administration, more resistance to the incoming Trump administration. So, some more dirt coming out about both administrations, uh, and also some instability in governments in all the way from Venezuela down to possibly touching Chile. Argentina is left largely alone in this situation, although there is a Mars line. Argentina is between a Mars, and Bolivia are between a Mars and a Rahu line. And there is increased aggravation and increased tension in Brazil because of this Mars line down here. Could present some economic problems for it. Uh, there's a Venus line running through Azores, and that's really not such a bad line. It just indicates excessive precipitation. There's a Sun line running through Spain and a Saturn line running through England, France, and up into Morocco, down next to Ghana, and a Rahu line running through Norway, Sweden, Denmark, close to Denmark, France, I'm sorry, Italy, um, Algeria, Libya, God, almost all of Western Africa. So there'll be government scandals in this general part of the world. Okay, so prepare yourselves. We're going to hear a lot of news from these parts of the world over the next few days, even though it's Christmas. There's a Mars line, so you'll probably see some increased violence in Germany, down into Austria, down into Turkey, down into um, Israel, down into Saudi Arabia, down into um, Kuwait. So this will be interesting. There's a nice Venus line running through Norway and into Ukraine and into um, I think it's UAR over here or Kuwait. I do get the two confused, but also into Iran. So you'll see um, some strike backs in those parts of the world, some violence in those parts of the world. And it's not because Venus is an inherently violent planet, but it can be a fanatical planet if provoked. Okay, so that's just something to keep in mind. Um, there are a variety of myths about Venus which have to do with um, revenge. Okay, so just being honest with you. All right. There's a Saturn line running through eastern India near Bengal, and there's a Jupiter line, so there may be some conflict over elections here. And there's a Mercury line, so we'll be hearing a lot more from Ladakh and Sri Lanka over the next few weeks. And we have a moon line running through uh, China, Vietnam, Cambodia, and also a Rahu line. So we can expect increased government scandals from those parts of the world. We're not going to escape from those. The Moon Rahu lines are going to be pretty consistent over the next couple of days, and Indonesia as well. So that's something to keep your eyes on the news about, and maybe some government um, challenges. There's a Mars line over China and over New Guinea and over Australia. So I would tend to say the Australian government is maybe not so maybe suffering is too strong a word, but they're going through their own identity crisis right now, pretty much like Canada is. So it's interesting that the Rahu conjunction is happening pretty much close to Toronto or to Ottawa, excuse me, and the Mars line is coming closer to Sydney over here. So, and there's a Venus line, so there's more interest in justice in Australia than normal. Um, the only line we have passing through um, New Zealand is a Mercury line, which is relatively, we'll hear some news, but nothing really earth-shakingly bad, although there could be bad news about the economy with the Saturn line going through there. So that's it for this week. I'll be back next week. Uh, Happy and snappy. And if you have any questions, if you'd like to make a comment, please do. If you can, subscribe, like, and share the screen with your friends or with people who you would think would be interested in this. And again, I do readings, um, and you can contact me for prices. I can't provide them in this format. And I wish you a wonderful holiday for those of you who celebrate Christmas, and whatever other holiday you may celebrate around this time of year. Have a great one. That's about it for me. And I'll see you next week. I love you all. And again, keep in mind, there are always opportunities, even among the chaos. Okay? All right. Thanks a lot, folks. Thanks for watching and have a blessed week. Okay? Bye bye now.